Blog Talk Radio.
Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Investigations team is in charge of the field. Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Investigations team. 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 Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Investigations team.
And welcome to another edition of Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Radio. On today's show, we have me, Jeremy, Tim, and Nick. Today's show is going to be about haunted Rhode Island, which is a topic that's handpicked by ours truly, Mothman Poirier, because he's in England. But we don't have a whole lot of news stories for today, but I guess we have some team news that we'd like to mention. We're in the middle of filming for a 3-part Bigfoot documentary, which is pretty exciting because it's never been done before on this specific general area. What do you think, Nick and Tim?
Yeah, so far everything's been working out pretty good so far.
So, anyways, I guess Nick's going to be the main host for this show. I was going to hand it off to you, Nick.
All right. Well, today, as King Sassy just said, we will be talking about haunted Rhode Island. Oh, to begin as I usually do, I will give you, the listener, a general overview of what the show will be about, and then I'll just get straight into specific stories and sightings. Well, Rhode Island has a very long and storied history in our country because it was one of the original 13 colonies, as most people know, and many things happened there. Revolutionary War battles. There was an Indian massacre where many Indians were killed by white settlers, I believe by Puritans who settled in the area back in the 1600s. So there's a very long rap sheet of things that Rhode Island has in its history, which definitely leads to very many hauntings. To start off, I'm going to talk about a story I heard probably when I was 8 or 9 years old on a haunted Woonsocket. Woonsocket's a town, a small city rather, that was right next to my hometown in Rhode Island, and it was an old mill city back in the early 1900s to about the 60s or 70s when the factories left the States and went to China, Mexico, and various places. But that'll give you kind of a background information for the context of the story. But back in, I believe, the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was a daughter of one of the mill owners who wanted to marry a certain man. She had the love of her life, and she just wanted to marry him above everything. But her father did not approve of the marriage, and she became very distraught and sad. So she went to this bridge, which still stands today in Woonsocket, in the Main Street district, in the area where you can find all these abandoned textile mills. And she went to the top of this bridge and cast herself into the river, and she was sucked down into an aqueduct or something, and she died a very horrible death by drowning, and then she was bludgeoned by rocks and various other things. And to this day, they say around the time of Halloween, I think, it's been over a decade since I've heard the story. I'm trying to recollect all the details, but they say she goes onto the bridge on the anniversary of her death and throws herself into the river again. I know there's a lot of stories such as this one in many parts of the country, but I definitely think it's very tragic and very sad that this lady did not have peace when she was alive, and now even after death, she still has not found peace. Jara, ghosts tend to stick around in areas when they die very violent deaths. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And so she's just, hopefully she'll find peace and cross over one day, but until then she repeats the final moment of her life over and over and over again. But now here's another story from St. Andrew's School in Burrington, Rhode Island, which is another small town about the size of my hometown, North Smithfield, which I'll get into later, about 20,000 people. But in St. Andrew's School, the old headmaster still walks the grounds wearing a red cape. He has been seen by staff and students, and a cold breeze is felt when he comes. Jeremy or Tim, do you care to maybe go on and to explain the various different types of activity or signs that occur when a ghost is about to manifest, like the temperature drops and electrical fluctuations and whatnot?
Yeah, Tim, could you do the honors? I'm trying to fight with the switchboard.
So yeah, what was the question again, Nick?
Can you explain about the different types of the different types of activity when something's about to manifest?
Oh yeah, well, it could be residual, like if it's previous energy, like it's left over from a different time, and the ghosts are just simply reenacting what they used to do, or how they used to live. Then there's all sorts of different hauntings, but residual seems to be the most popular kind. But there's also
I think that was his question.
kind of like a random haunting. What?
So that wasn't his question.
Okay, what then?
Oh.
No, you could go ahead. That just wasn't what he was asking.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's what I thought you were asking.
Oh, that's okay.
Well, then would Jeremy mind doing the honors?
Well, most often when there's a spirit about to manifest itself, usually what happens is one of the most common phenomenon is cold spots or hot spots, which, in short, if energy is gathering or leaving an area, it's going to get either hot or cold. And your body could sense this. Sometimes it's drastic, sometimes it's not. I mean, we've been in places where we got drastic readings, like where it'll drop like 10 degrees in one area, 10 degrees in others. Again, sometimes if you're ghost hunting or something like that, you could see different types of energy, like orbs and things like that, going or coming from an area, which goes along with those cold or hot spots. Again, there's a lot of static electricity in the air sometimes. Like you'll see like the hair will stand up on your neck or things like that.
All right, very good. Well, the next story comes from Block Island, And apparently we're having technical difficulties, and we're just going to keep going on with the show, though. Block Island, for those of you who do not know, is a very small island off the southeastern coast of Rhode Island, I believe. Again, it's been many years since I've lived in that state. I've actually been there before. You take a ferry from a harbor over to Block Island. It's a very popular tourist spot, and there's many ghost stories and various other types of tales that surround the island. But years ago, there was a fire, a ship that was on fire, and many people died, and it sunk to the bottom of the sea. To this day, strange lights are said to appear near the coast of the island where the ship was set on fire, and you can hear children crying in the middle of the night. Tim, do you think that's more of a residual haunting than anything else?
What's that, Nick? What's that?
Oh, Jared, do you think that's more of a residual? Did you just hear the story?
No, sorry, I'm trying to fight with the switchboard.
Oh, well, okay, I'll just give my opinion, I guess. I guess this does sound like a residual haunting, as King Gray was saying earlier, where a large amount of negative energy leaves somewhat of an imprint within the fabric of time and space. We really cannot understand the phenomena quite well, but that's one of the theories of why a haunting occurs. And residual hauntings are typically the most common reported hauntings. Now, also on Block Island, at the Harborside Inn, there's a woman dressed in a 19th century black dress seen on the third floor, specifically room 302. People report being grabbed from behind. They say it is as if she tries to move them out of the way when they're walking in the third floor hallway near this hotel room. Now, there's not a lot of information about who the woman is or how she died, and I can only speculate on why the spirit may act like this, but maybe she has such a strong attachment to the room that she feels it's still hers and that she doesn't want anybody getting in her way when she wants to go there. Mm-hmm. Or maybe she could have committed suicide. I mean, there's so many different possibilities of what could have happened that, again, I can only speculate on it. Jer, are you there still, or is the thing messing up?
Yeah, Tim barely got it to work in the other room.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask you, even though this has nothing to do with Rhode Island, what type of phenomena is usually associated with, like, haunted hotels? Because I know our team has done quite a number of investigations at haunted hotels throughout the West Coast. What kind of things have our team uncovered on investigations in these haunted hotels to kind of get you ass up with Block Island?
Usually, to tell you the truth, it's more like intelligent type things where it's something that knows it's dead or knows that it's there. It just doesn't want to be bothered is usually what we see. But we have had, for instance, a ghost of a sheriff that was checking all the doors of a old brothel to make sure the prostitutes were in their rooms. That was pretty cool. I mean, that was a residual. We have had a lot of cases where things are actually trying to speak to us, or things are acting and reacting to whatever we're doing at the present time. So.
Oh, well, I don't know why this lady dressed in the black dress tries to stop people or pushes people aside to get to the hotel room, but for some reason in death she cannot leave and cross over, and she has a very big attachment to the room. My next story actually is very personal. It's one of my own accounts from when I was a child. When I was a kid, I experienced many weird things in terms of ghostly phenomena. That's one of the biggest reasons why I'm interested in the paranormal to this day, is just the weird things that happen. Just a little background information I'll give you. My house was on a back road located on a few acres of woods, and the house itself was not very old, which was quite peculiar due to the amount of haunted activity that occurred. Usually haunted activity occurs in very old houses, but my house at the time that I lived in it was only, I think, about 20 years old. So now it's 35, 40 years old pops. So it's not an old home at all. So it's quite weird that I experienced all these haunted or all these paranormal things. But there were, curiously, some Indian burial mounds in my backyard. I didn't find this out till about 4 or 5 years ago when I was just looking up some information, I think for this radio show, and I saw a news story saying that there were hundreds, maybe even thousands of these burial mounds in Rhode Island that the Indians, they would dig a shallow grave, put their dead in the grave, and then cover them with some dirt and rocks. And these burial mounds were in my backyard, or at least a few of them. I think there were 2 or 3 of them in my backyard. So that could be a reason why there was so much paranormal activity there. And also, when I was a child, I was walking in the woods, and I stepped upon what I believe to this day to be a satanic or an occult worship site. I came across a fire pit, and near the fire pit was a giant rock. And on the face of the rock was a pentagram drawn with a weird red substance. Now, I cannot tell you what the red substance was, but when I saw it as a kid, it scared the living heebie-jeebies out of me, and I ran home, and I think I cried to my mother. I don't remember exactly, but I do remember that red pentagram on the rock near the fire pit, and it just was just crazy and wild.
Wow. Do you think that the spiritual activity you've seen in your house was related to the satanic stuff in your backyard?
Oh, I definitely think so. I think that the stuff that these, I don't know who it was, most likely high school kids, what these high school kids were doing, on top of the fact that it was next to Indian burial sites, really opened up the gateway for spiritual entities to make their presence felt. And I'll get right now into what I simply titled my Black Cat story. Again, I don't know what the heck this was to this day, but I remember this like it's a photographic memory. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, which was the time in my life where I experienced most of the paranormal activity in my life, I was playing in my front yard. I don't know what I was doing, but I was in my front yard doing something. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw this large black figure, or a panther. It looked like a black panther or a dog out of the corner of my eye, and I turned and it rushed into the woods across the street from my house. So I ran down the street. I don't know why. I was curious. I wasn't afraid this time when I saw this. I was curious to see what had happened or what it was. I ran down the street, and I glanced into the woods across the street. There was nothing there. It just vanished into thin air. There was nothing. A large black dog or panther-like figure just vanished into thin air. And I know that animal spiritual entities are associated with Indian burial areas. Like out here in the West Coast, you have the skinwalkers, who are associated with the various different tribal sites in Nevada and other places in the western United States.
My question, though, is you think maybe that you think it could have been maybe like a skinwalker, like an Indian spiritual type thing? Or do you think maybe the cat was something demonic that was in the area, or maybe it was some sort of like an imp or something showing itself like a cat?
See, I don't know. It could have been a skinwalker. I mean, I'm not too familiar with Native American mythology and folklore, but I think if it was a skinwalker, there would have had to have been some practitioners of Indian shamanism or Indian magic in the area. So it most likely was something that was either demonic or like an imp, because there are very few Native Americans left in Rhode Island. I don't think, besides the Mohican Casino, there's any Indians left in Rhode Island, so I don't think any of them practices Indian black magic. So I don't think it was a skinwalker or something. It could have been, but I think it was more likely a demonic or some type of nefarious entity, because, again, like I stated, yeah.
So do you think that maybe it couldn't be something spiritual altogether, and maybe you've seen one of those cryptid black cats that they say are in New Jersey and all that?
That was what I thought for a while. I thought that maybe it was just some weird animal that was seen in New Jersey or Pennsylvania, those black cat sightings. But the very fact that I, went down to the wood, the tree line between the street and the woods, and looked into the woods and didn't see anything. This was a large thing that I saw. This wasn't just like a little itty-bitty animal that could have disappeared into the bushes very easy. This was an animal that I would have seen running into the trees and into someone's yard, which was a ways back into the woods. So, by the very fact that the creature vanished into thin air, I think it's a spiritual entity and not a cryptid or a physical one.
Yeah.
So the other thing I was going to say was, do you know where the creature went, or did it literally just vanish in front of your eyes?
It literally vanished into thin air, almost like that UFO we saw the other day, which we might have to talk about on another show. But when I went down to the tree line to see this thing, I saw the creature run. It went really fast. It maybe took 3 or 4 steps, really big, more like leaping bounds into the woods, and I ran after it right after I saw it, because I was like, what the heck is that? There are no big black cats or dogs in Rhode Island, in the neighborhood I grew up in. So I was curious to see what it was, and when I went to see what it was gone. It disappeared into thin air.
Man, that's weird.
Yeah, that is pretty weird.
Yeah, it's one of the weirdest encounters with the paranormal I've ever had in my life.
Well, Nick, did you say the story about the person you seen looking out the window?
Oh, no, not yet. I can get to that now. Here's another personal story of mine from the house I grew up in North Smithfield, Rhode Island. When I was, again, about 7 or 8 years old, I remember waking up one night, and I had this weird feeling, and I looked at the foot of my bed, and in the moonlight, standing at the window, because my bed was against the wall, and the foot of my bed was right next to the window, and my pillow was on obviously the opposite side near a corner. But I looked at the foot of my bed, and I saw this old man standing at the foot of my bed looking out the window. He was wearing a red sweater or a red vest, and he had a black bow tie on. I remember that. I think it was a sweater, like a weird sweater vest thing with a white collared shirt and a black bow tie, and he had this really sad look on his face, this lost look. He was very old. His hair was white, silvery white. Like, this guy looked like he was in his 80s or 90s. He was just, he looked like he was looking for something he lost. And he looked at me, And you can imagine that being a 7-year-old kid, you see a man standing at the foot of your bed, you're going to be terrified. I literally froze in fear. I mean, some people are probably listening now saying, well, why didn't you run and go get your parents? I was so terrified I froze in fear. So I did what many kids do when they get afraid. I hid under my blankets. And after I hid under my blankets, I thought it was safe to look out, after like a minute or two. And I pulled the covers off of my head, and I looked in the room, and it wasn't safe at all, because standing by my door was a shadow person. This, again, I learned about 6 or 7 years ago. I learned more about the paranormal, and it was a shadow person that was standing at the near my door in the corner of the room, and he wasn't doing anything, but he was just standing there. And then next to my bed was a short, small shadow person, I guess an imp, walking on the floor. And I looked to the ceiling, and I saw a pair of green eyes looking at me. That was one of the most terrified I've ever been in my life. One of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had in my life. And again, I just hid under the covers and shut my eyes and pretended that it wasn't there. It was crazy. Again, like I said, my house wasn't very old, so I don't know why this old man was there, standing at the foot of my bed looking out the window, and why these shadow people were also in the same room. But maybe the old man was being held there by the shadow people, because I know there's a story about the Connecticut house where I think some demons were keeping a regular spirit trapped, and they kept that spirit from crossing over. So perhaps it was that, I don't know.
Because we've had incidences where we've had bad spirits holding back good spirits. We've also had good spirits holding back the bad spirits from causing mischief also, though.
And that could have been a possibility, because, I mean, I have my own personal stories that I could sit here and go on and on and on and on about. I guess I'll tell you guys one more, and then I'll go back to the stories that I collected in my research for the show. This next story that I'm going to tell you may somewhat support what Jeremy just said. The old man may have been trying to protect me from these evil entities. I remember one night, well, I'll give a little background information first. On at least a few nights that I can remember, obviously as a child, I can't remember every little night that I slept, but on many nights I remember waking up in a sheer terror in the middle of the night, like something was attacking me. I don't know how to explain it. It felt like something was filling me with absolute terror. I don't know how to really explain it in an analogy. I don't know an analogy that could explain what these these panic attacks at night were like. I mean, they were just panic attacks. I mean, I just could tell you I felt sheer terror. I mean, I remember on one occasion I woke up and I felt like, again, I was in sheer terror, and there was nothing there. I didn't see anything, but I could feel like an evil presence that was just so evil. I can't really put it into words. And, being a little boy, I really didn't know what to do to make this feeling go away. Yeah. I then thought to myself, maybe then I should just say a little prayer that I had learned at church, the Hail Mary. I went to a Catholic church as a small child. I started to pray my Hail Mary over and over and over and over again when I had this feeling. And eventually, after I prayed the Hail Mary maybe 100 times, feeling finally went away, and, I just went into sleep. And then on one more occasion, I woke up in the middle of the night with the sheer terror. And this is mildly disturbing. I had like a vision, I guess. That's probably the best way to put it. A vision of myself lying in like an open casket. This is kind of very creepy for a 7-year-old to think of, but or an 8-year-old. Here I was lying in my bed, and I was awake. I wasn't asleep. I had this vision of myself lying in an open casket, dressed in, in a tuxedo, and my eyes were closed, and I was kind of pale, and it was just freaky. And I started to cry really hard. I felt the sheer terror again that I felt from a few nights before when I said the Hail Mary. I felt the sheer terror, and I started to cry, and I started saying, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. And because the next morning, my mom came to me and said, Nick, did you have nightmares last night? I said, why? She goes, you were screaming, I don't want to die, I don't want to die. And even my mother heard me, crying in the middle of the night about this, and that's what happened. I had this vision of me lying in an open casket, and I had that feeling, that presence, that dark, evil presence was there when I had this vision.
So do you think that the presence or the entities were, I don't know how you say it, trying to like mess with your head somehow?
Yeah, I think so. I've actually thought about that probably my entire life, because I've had to deal with paranormal activity up until, recently when I lived in Ohio. I was dealing with things that were going on. Again, that'll be for another show, but yeah, I wondered what the heck were those entities doing, and why were they coming after me? I didn't ask for this. I wasn't really interested in this stuff. I was a kid. So it's just, it baffles me. It's baffling to this day that these things happen, but
well, Nick, is there any you could talk a little bit about your some of the reports you've collected?
Yeah, I'm getting into those right now. In the research that I have done for this show, here are some more reports that I've collected from different people. In Bristol, Rhode Island, in the Colt School, which still stands to this day, there's a picture of a family in the auditorium. I don't know whose family it is or what they did. They probably were benefactors of the school or something, but the family is supposed to haunt the school. I think it's a mother and a father and a few children are reported to have been walking the halls and messing with people and whatnot. In the boys' bathroom specifically, strange smells and sounds can be heard, and again, apparitions can be seen wandering the halls. Earlier we were talking about things that happen when a ghost is about to manifest, and strange smells is one of them. I know over in, Goldfield, Jer, where there's a ghost or a demon in the basement of a hotel that smells like rotten meat. Okay. Well, you get weird smells like rotting meat or various other things that people describe when a ghost is about to appear. And in the boys' bathroom in the school, the strange smells and sounds are present. So those are just classic signs of a haunting. Again, I don't know why this family haunts the school. Again, maybe they're very attached to the school and they don't want to leave after they have died. So
yeah,
maybe that's why they're still there. Again, in Bristol, yeah.
We're getting a question right now on our Facebook. It's saying, do you think that there's more hauntings reported in houses, schools, or hotels from your research in Rhode Island?
Well, most of the reports that I have gathered come from, hotels and schools, more so than haunted houses. Now, that does not necessarily mean that more hauntings occur in schools or hotels than houses. It just could mean that people who have hauntings in their houses don't want to talk about them. But, based on my research that I have now, it seems that more hauntings occur in schools or hotels.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, that's okay. Like I said, listeners' questions are always welcome. I want them to ask questions. This is an interactive show, and it's not just us blabbering away. I
think Tim had a question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Oh, no, I didn't say anything. I was just saying, interact with us. That's what we're here for.
Oh, okay. Well, in Bristol again, in Colt State Park, which I guess is right next to Colt School, there was a farm there until the 1950s or 60s when the land was sold to the state government. A stable hand died in a barn, which is now used as an administration office. Lights shut on and off. Doors are opened and closed by themselves. Also on the grounds is a place called Suicide Hill, where two girls have been spotted frequently. And I guess back in the 1970s, two girls drowned in a stream or a river within the woods in that area.
So do you think that if they drowned in the river nearby, that would cause them to haunt that school or like that barn area? Or what's your opinion?
I definitely think that if they drowned, they obviously died a very violent death, and they may be trapped there again. It may be a residual haunting. Or here's another thing we haven't brought up yet. Jer, oftentimes when people die violent deaths, or sometimes when they die violent deaths, don't some spirits turn into poltergeists?
Well, people that died violent deaths, it really depends. Usually if they are someone that is angry and evil in life, usually they're going to be angry and evil in death. It's not always the case, but that's what happens a lot of the time. Like, for instance, one of the stories that stands out to me is there was an abandoned orphanage. I think it's over in Ohio or Indiana or Illinois, one of those. Anyways, there was this guy. He was an alleged molester, child molester, and a criminal type of guy. He was like the janitor for this orphanage. Well, apparently he was doing things with these children and breaking the law frequently, and now that he's in death, they've done EVPs and different types of phenomenon with this man is angry in death, and he's a bad person in death, too, like he was when he was alive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I've seen that on a documentary that we've watched before. But, again, these could be residual hauntings, or maybe these people are just trapped there until they can cross over for whatever reason. Here's another story.
Question.
Oh, okay.
Okay, the question is, so what would you rank Rhode Island as far as hauntings go compared to the average place?
Well, I would say that it's probably actually one of the more haunted places in the country, but that's simply because, like I said earlier in the show, that the state's very old. It's one of the original 13 colonies, so that's why I think there's a lot of hauntings that occur there. Now, as far as reported hauntings go, there may not be as many as some other areas, but that's just my own personal opinion.
So you would say that it's haunted more than like Utah or Nevada or somewhere like that?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Again, not, it's just simply because the state has been around longer. There's been people living in the eastern area of the United States longer than the western area. Unless you want to take into account for the Native American populations that live on the west and eastern seaboards, then that's a whole other discussion entirely. But as far as European people living in the United States, they've been on the East Coast longer than the West.
Yeah.
That's true.
So, Nick, I was going to say, do you have any stories about haunted battlegrounds in Rhode Island?
Well, yeah, I can recall a story that I have heard. Actually, I mentioned it earlier in the show. Unfortunately, again, the details escape my mind. This is something I'm going totally off the cuff with. There was a massacre that occurred back in the 1600s. Some of the local Native American tribes went and attacked a Christian Puritan settlement and killed a couple of people. Well, what happened was the Puritans, retaliated, and they just went berserk and just started slaughtering women, children, old people, etc., just butchering these Indians. And there's actually the battlefield now where the massacre occurred actually is just covered. The ground is covered in burial mounds. There's hundreds of them, hundreds of burial mounds. There's actually a controversy right now with this, where a apartment or a condominium company is trying to buy the land, and they're trying to clear out the graves, and a bunch of people are saying they can't do it and whatnot. But to this day, they say that there are ghosts of Indians who were massacred at that battle in the area. I can't name the specific area. I'd have to look it up. But there are people Indians and Puritans, who haunt the battlefield where the massacre took place.
I say because
that's pretty cool.
I know that there was different battles for like the Revolution and things in Rhode Island. I was just personally curious. I wasn't really sure because me and Tim, of course, have never been there. So.
Well, yeah, there are stories of the Revolutionary War. I went to many of these as a child. I can't believe this escaped my mind. In Newport, Rhode Island, there is a Revolutionary War fort. And this place is crazy. If you walk in there, it just screams haunted. There's these ammunition bunkers beneath the ground. You can walk down there. They're empty now, of course, but they say that there are soldiers from the Revolutionary War that still haunt this fort. I think it's called Fort Adams, I believe.
I can picture it.
I'd have to double check. I went to actually many Revolutionary War forts as a child. I know you guys said your grandparents took you to like ghost towns to go see that type of thing. My parents brought me to Revolutionary War forts. I don't know why, but we went to one of those, and many of the Revolutionary War forts have their ghost stories. Of course, Fort Adams in Newport, Rhode Island, has many ghosts that still think they're fighting in the Revolutionary War, apparently.
I was going to say, go ahead.
No, I didn't say anything. Go ahead.
I thought you were going to say something, but I'd say, Nick, something I was kind of curious about. Do you have any stories about any sort of poltergeist activity?
One of the stories we already went through, where the lady pushes people on her way to the, room could be classified perhaps as a poltergeist. Well, there is an interesting story in Newport, Rhode Island, where there is an old, it's an old monastery, or it was somebody's mansion. I have to double check, but there's this mansion in Newport, Rhode Island. There's a whole street in Newport full of mansions. In the middle of the 1800s, a bunch of the richest people in the world went to Newport and built mansion after mansion after mansion in this one section of the city. And I've toured some of these mansions. But in one of these mansions, they say a nun committed suicide and hung herself in this room. I've actually been to this room, and the room is now boarded up, and you can't get inside. And there are, poltergeist phenomena associated with that mansion, and specifically around the location of that room. It's so bad that they have to have a Catholic priest come and bless the
Here's
room.
Johnny!
I guess you could say that. But, it's so bad that they have to have kind of an exorcism performed on the room every year. And they, like I said, they boarded it up. They won't let anybody in there to go see what is inside.
That's weird. You think someone might have gotten hurt in there or something?
Yeah, a nun hung herself in the room.
No, not that. I mean, like, since then.
Oh, has anyone gotten hurt? Not that I have found out. It may have happened, but not to my knowledge.
So what's some of the more interesting stories that you found, Nick?
Here's an interesting story, which is kind of amusing, I guess, in a weird way. In Central Falls, Rhode Island, where my mother was born, in the Cartes Health Center, which is a retirement home, in the 90s, a third shift worker was on her way to the candy machine to get a late night snack. And when she passed through the hallway, a smiling woman came out of nowhere who told her that she was a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed person. The worker was creeped out because she did not recognize the woman. And she went to go run to the desk to call security. And when security went to go find this woman, she was gone. She just completely vanished. And the worker to this day swears, there was nobody in the building that was not supposed to be there, because the visiting hours were done. It was during the third shift. And she said it was not one of the residents. So, well, maybe it was a resident, but it was a resident living there post-mortem. So I thought that was quite an interesting story. She went to go to the candy machine to get a snack, and this ghost pops up out of nowhere and says, "Look, you're quite a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed young lady." I could just
that is weird.
That.
The ghost was like looking for that lady, or maybe she just happened to go by where the ghost was at. That's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it is kind of a weird story.
Well, because I don't doubt that the ghost is smart like that, because we've had a lot of things that have been trying to contact us. Like, we've had one time where Brent was going, "My name's Brent," and then some little child's voice goes, "Nice to meet you," in the background. Stuff like that.
Yeah. I remember that EVP. Here's another story from Bristol. In Roger Williams University, in the theater specifically, a ghost there named Bonquo is rumored to be a farmhand that froze to death when that area had been originally, where that theater stands, there was two barns in the 19th century, and a farmhand froze to death there. And from time to time, the apparition of that farmhand appears, and there are very, very severe cold spots in the area where he appears because he froze to death.
That's weird. So do they actually see the ghosts or just have cold spots?
They do see apparitions, and both of them occur. Sometimes he appears, sometimes he doesn't. But whenever he is around, there are very, very severe cold spots, like, where the temperature gets below freezing because the farmhand, when he was alive, froze to death. So I guess he's kind of trapped in an eternal cycle of freezing to death. I'm not sure, but it's kind of one of those sad but weird stories.
So you're going to say sad but true, like Metallica?
Yeah, it's sad but true. Oh, here's a interesting story that some listeners may have heard about before. It is the story of Mercy Brown of Exeter, Rhode Island. Mercy Brown was a little girl who died back in back in the late 1800s. And when she died, her father was hell-bent on saying that she was a vampire and that she was coming back from the dead to haunt her family and harm them. So what happened is he went to her grave and he dug it out and he took her body out of the grave and then he, had her mouth stuffed with garlic, all her organs removed, her head severed from her body and some various other things. He had a priest bless the body and the grave site. So after this poor girl had died, I think of, like pneumonia or something. And she was buried, and instead of being able to rest in peace, her dad dug her body up and basically cut it into pieces and stuffed her mouth full of garlic. And to this day, they say that her ghost appears right next to the gravesite. If you go visit her gravesite in Exeter, at the end of this long dirt road, they say her ghost appears to people who visit her and wish to pay their respects. They also say that when you go to see her, there's two different versions of the story. One version says that she appears right away when you go to the grave. The other version of the story says she does not appear until you cross this bridge after you visit the gravesite and you are, on your way out. Because there's a couple bridges you have to take to get to the old church graveyard where her grave is. And she appears on the second bridge on the way back to, to people. And then randomly, a ghost truck, first, I don't know where this comes from, a phantom truck comes out of nowhere then and allegedly follows people until they get to the freeway, and then the truck vanishes.
That's weird. So, Nick, here's a good question. Do you think maybe that's you said there's two versions of the story about the girl. Do you think maybe both stories could be true? Maybe she appears in both places?
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't doubt that. I read the story. I've heard this story before in the past, but I wasn't reminded of it until recently when I was doing my notes for the show.
Nick.
And I can't help but feel for this girl. She died of pneumonia again or some other disease, and
Are we going to stuff your mouth with garlic and make you go out there?
Oh, yeah. I'll probably be paid a visit by some nice entities if I do that. Yeah, this poor girl died, and her grave was desecrated by her own father, so I'm pretty sure that her spirit's really, uneasy.
I think we have time.
In the afterlife.
I think we have time for one more story, Nick, because we have about 5 minutes left in the show.
Okay. Well, I collected quite a number of stories. I guess. Oh, here's a famous. Oh, I guess maybe not famous, but it's a very famous, locally known road in Cumberland, Rhode Island, called Tower Hill Road. many ghosts are spotted on this road. One is a little girl that appears in one of the front yards in one of the houses on the road. And then a little boy, a ghost of a little boy walking his dog is also seen. And then a little boy riding a tricycle down the road has been seen by many people. Apparently, this road has had a good deal of fatalities. People being hit by cars, especially children. I remember when I was growing up, my dad told me stories about this road. He said, you don't go on that road because back when I was a kid, a lot of little boys and little girls were getting hit by cars because it's I'm trying to think of a really bad road in Vegas that I could liken it to. I guess maybe some of those roads down in the south end of the valley where there's no lights and cars just whip around the corner and you can't see what's coming at you and you get struck. It's kind of like that, where it's a really long, winded, curvy road, and these kids would go out and play on the road back in the 60s and 70s, and a car would just speed down the road and, take these kids out, and they have no chance with these speeding cars down this road. So apparently some of these children who have died on that road are still there to this day.
Oh, man, that's weird. Do they just, run out in the road, or are they just in the front yards like you were saying?
There's a bunch. There's actually a few. There's at least 3 I've chronicled here in my notes, 3 different apparitions. One was a little girl in the front yard of one of the houses, but 2 of the other ones were, one was a little boy walking his dog, and then another was a little boy riding a tricycle down the street. So apparently these little boys were, one was walking his dog and the other one was riding a tricycle when they got hit by cars on this road, and they are still there walking down that street even after they have died.
Okay, well, sorry to cut you short, Nick, but we have 2 or 3 minutes left in the show. I just wanted to make a quick recap. Today's show, we talked about haunted Rhode Island. Nick hosted the show today, of course. Next week's show, we're going to talk about the famous Chinese hopping zombie. It's like a ghostly creature report-like thing. Should be pretty exciting. Again, we'll probably have to have a follow-up on haunted Rhode Island since Nick has so many notes on it. Again, tune in next week at 3 p.m. Pacific time for our Chinese hopping zombie show. Again, I'd like to thank Nick for hosting the show. I'd like to thank everybody that contributed. I'd like to thank everyone that contributed, and I'd like to thank, again, my co-hosts. I'll let Tim and Nick say their goodbyes for you in the show for today.
All right, everybody.